Betting in sports in India and gambling should be legalized. This is a recommendation from the Law Commission. In its report, the Commission has recommended measures to regulate gambling and betting in all sports, including cricket. The Commission has even recommended the use of Aadhaar and PAN cards to track and regulate the sector. In addition, the Law Commission says more stringent laws should be made to make match fixing and sports frauds a criminal offence. There is some opposition to these recommendations as well, but we'll have to wait and see what Parliament decides. Is it a good idea, though? To speak on this, I'm joined now by Hardik Dhebar. He's Group CFO of Delta Corp. I'm also speaking today with Ranjana Adhikari. She's a co-head media, entertainment and gaming practice at Nishit Desai Associates, and she'll give us the legal angle to this entire story. Let me start with Hardik. Hardik, I'm assuming you would be completely for legalization of betting and gambling. But what do you say to those that argue that this will just encourage something which has moral compulsions?
Being for legalization of gambling and betting is obviously a no-brainer, and an average Indian citizen should look at supporting it wholeheartedly, for the simple reason is that whether there is a morality angle or not, we all know for a fact every time a cricket match is played in India, the next day, a big one though, of course, like an India-Pakistan or a World Cup or something like that, the next day you will have numbers in the newspaper's front page that bookies betted worth 5,000 crores and 10,000 crores and what numbers. And these are numbers that are presented to us by the media. In reality, we don't know what kind of numbers these are. So I look at it this way from a government perspective: how much of revenue is being lost by the exchequer in all this by simply legalizing gambling, casinos, betting, etc. A huge whole new stream of revenue can be opened up for the exchequer, and I think we are struggling to meet budget deficits and fiscal deficits. I think this is one area which can definitely help bridging those gaps. May not be in entirety, but to a large extent.
Of course, for you specifically, it would definitely help your company. Can you give us an idea of the kind of revenues perhaps that could be made by the Indian government?
So in India today, it's a state subject. So each state basically decides whether they want to permit a form of betting, gambling or no. And as far as we know, there are only two jurisdictions currently in the country where there are licenses for casinos that have been issued. And there is obviously a third location where we are trying to get a license, and hopefully we will get it soon. If I was to just take Goa as an example, because Goa has been the gambling, has legalized gambling for the oldest period of time, right from 1995-96 onwards to today, we are in 2018. And it would not be wrong to say that today it's a very well-entrenched economic fabric of the state. And if you look at the last couple of years, we as the casino industry per se in Goa would have contributed in excess of a couple of $100 million as an industry put together in the last couple of years.
You talk about Goa. There have been people who are opposed to Goa allowing this. It came up in the last elections as well, with some parties promising that they would end all of this. But I'll come back to that. Let me come to Ranjana Adhikari on what the Law Commission has recommended in its paper on legalizing betting in sports as well as gambling. Now, a couple of things. Linking it to Aadhaar and PAN for anyone who participates above the age of 18, of course. And also, they recommend limiting the number of times in a month or a year a person can bet or gamble. Do you think that makes sense?
Hi. I think before I respond to that, let me, say one thing here. I'm going to talk not just as a lawyer today, but also as a citizen who really believes in embracing change when the positives really outweigh the negatives, and you need to really change community standards. But at the same time, there needs to be a sort of a balance in the two. And I think the question that you posed to me is somewhere in the same domain. what the Law Commission's done has obviously given very forward-looking recommendations of, waking up, smelling the coffee and really realizing that a problem exists today and there are revenues being lost by the exchequer. So why not look at regularizing it and taxing it and bringing it under a licensed regime? But having said that, one cannot really forget the fact that there is a larger issue out there with the 1.3 billion population of the country where there could be the issue of what you call as problem gambling. So I think what the Law Commission is trying to do is somewhere put the seed of thought in the mind of the legislators that while it's important to regularize and legislate this, at the same time, what you need to do is ensure that the person who's gaming on these portals would not end up losing their entire money. And I think when the Law Commission actually looks at making these recommendations, they have done a very in-depth study of it, looking at what global practices have been and how countries like UK and other European countries have battled the same problem of, people really ending up spending the entire life's worth and life's money. And
this is exactly the point I was making. Yeah. You either legalize gambling or you don't. But can the state play moral police and then decide who can indulge in this, how much? There is also one recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, which says that people who don't come under the purview of income tax or the GST Act should not be allowed. That means you're saying that people below a certain income level should not be allowed to gamble or bet, but if you're richer, you can. How would that stand?
I think let's look at it more from a balanced perspective instead of a way that you're allowing only the rich but not the poor. I think the perspective is that there is a certain economic threshold being put in at the end of the day, so that while it is looked as an entertainment factor, it should not lead to a position where people end up losing their entire life's worth and ending up in the issue that people kind of mix it up with morality as well. But we are cognizant and aware of the fact that there are suicides happening out there. There are people who are complaining that true to like alcoholism, similar to that, people are losing a lot of money and maybe even lottery. So trying to put some sort of a balance in the entire system, it's a recommendation that the Law Commission makes that put some sort of a monetary threshold. And it's not saying that you put a threshold to only allow the rich to play, but allow those people to pay who can have some amount being set aside for the entertainment factor and the rest for carrying out life as it would be.
Ranjana, that is playing nanny and deciding whether you are financially fit to indulge in something which is legal if the recommendations go through. How do you know that a rich person won't blow up their entire income on this either? If it's a moral hazard, it's a moral hazard to everyone, rich or poor.
Absolutely. You very correctly put it, which is why I think the second bit of the recommendation is, one, who do you allow to come on these platforms to play? But number two, how much do you allow that person to even indulge in the activity, which is where the Law Commission has recommended the amount of money that you could put at bet, the number of times you can place a bet. It's basically giving some sort of a, threshold beyond which it would affect the life of the people. They're trying to get some sort of a balance, and it's not something which is uncommon, honestly. It's something that globally is a practice that's also been followed, and it's coming from the best practices. And to be very honest, the Constitution of India also kind of recognizes reasonable restrictions to be imposed in general. And it's in tandem with the same principle. Honestly, from my perspective, I don't see that to be a very wrong recommendation. Question is, what are going to be these monetary thresholds and what are really going to be the number of times that the legislation is going to allow them to place bets?
Let me come to Hardik to come in on this discussion. Hardik, I'm not sure if you've seen the broad recommendations of the Law Commission report. We don't even know how it will be accepted and once it touches the political sphere. But do you think that it would be very difficult to convince lawmakers to go ahead with legalizing this, looking at the stigma attached to it in a number of places?
Well, I think, the point of stigma, I think, is slowly but surely waning, given the fact that you have countries like Singapore, which is considered to be one of the most conservative of the societies and restrictive of the societies, has gone ahead and embraced and legalized casinos in their country. Now you're looking at Japan, which after months and years and decades of debate has opened itself up. So I think, people have slowly but surely definitely realized that if you position this correctly, regularize it, control it, and open it up in the right way, it not only is a huge tourism booster, it is not only a huge booster, but it makes the country a destination. Jobs, infrastructure, and a country like India, maybe even foreign direct investment inflows, because that is one of the recommendations that the Law Commission has made, which we believe is a very, very big positive. But one caution that I would obviously like to draw to the lawmakers is that, the tendency is that something of this kind, whether it is gambling or betting, whenever is opened up, the tendency is to try and tax it so much that to try and, you say to kill the golden goose and try to recover all the eggs at one go. Now, the beauty of the whole thing is to make it in moderation and keep it more stable, such that the idea should be to kill the parallel gambling market, kill the illegal gambling market and the underbelly casinos that operate all the time. If the lawmakers tend to then...
I just want to come in on that, Hardik. There is no guarantee that those would disappear, especially with the kind of stringent recommendations that the Law Commission has made, where you're saying that if you're out of the IT Act and the GST Act, then you don't get to gamble. That the law should determine how many times you gamble in a year or in a month, or how much of your income you spend. So anyone who wants to go above that quota will find another way.
Well, yes and no. First of all, I don't know how much of that is going to be feasible and how much of that regulation is, what the government is going to be able to implement or is going to adopt in terms of a number of times that a person can gamble or the number of amounts that a person can gamble. And I would like to add there that we as Delta Corp, we have been operating casinos for the last 10 years. And, we have been also practicing and exercising what is called as, responsible gaming. So we as casino operators also, try and tutor people about it, counsel people about it. So I think it's a part of the, social responsibility in the ecosystem that you operate in. So I guess while, you may bring in restrictions this way, I don't think that's going to fly very well. And I don't know how people are going to react to it or whether it's going to be implementable or no. But I guess it is important that we practice responsible gaming, we preach responsible gaming, and ensure that nobody gets out of the whack.
Ranjana, do you see the likelihood of this being taken forward, looking at the political environment right now?
To be very honest with you, I was not as hopeful before this report really came out. I wasn't really even expecting the report to come out when it did. I thought with the elections around the corner, things would take a slightly slower course. But to be very honest with you, 10 years back, we were not even talking about it. It was a taboo. But the fact in the last 5 years, there's been so much furor around it. I would not be surprised that people would really realize the importance of this discussion. And I'm not saying in the next 2 years there's going to be something, but I do hope that with the new government or the existing government getting a next term, whichever way it may be, but seeing the business case to it and seeing a larger purpose to it may definitely be on the tables. We just need the right people to be in power, but that's always going to be a question of fact. So let's see what the elections really, throw up for us. And depending on that, I'm quite positive that this should be something should be debated in the next 5 years for sure.
Okay, I'm not too sure if this is something the current government can push ahead with, considering that the political opposition has already begun. Congress leader Manish Tiwari has held a press conference today after the Law Commission recommendations have come out and said that if you legalize betting in sport, you will not only spoil the sport but also turn every pawn shop in the country into a juए का अड्डा. Can the current government really push through that kind of criticism is a big ask. Thank you so much though for joining us in with your views. Hardik Dhebar and Ranjana Adhikari discussing whether there should be a legalization of gambling and betting in sports. That's the Law Commission recommendations. Just an interesting fact, FICCI has estimated the underground market for betting in sports to be to the tune of 3 lakh crore rupees. Imagine if that were taxed and the kind of revenues that would then be available to the government. Perhaps they could go easy then on petrol and diesel.